Hello and welcome to the Coastal Edge Consulting channel. You know what I've been thinking about lately? If you scroll LinkedIn or listen to conversations about work and leadership, it can feel like everything is falling apart. There's a lot of talk of burnout and disengagement. Even myself, I've talked a lot about those things. Leaders are stretched impossibly thin. Employees are exhausted and they're quietly quitting, as are leaders. A lot of that is real, but I also realized something about my own content. I talk a lot about what's broken, and I don't talk nearly enough about what's actually working and the positive changes that I've been seeing and hearing. Because quietly, some really positive shifts are happening in teams and organizations. They're not these big flashy things, but they are meaningful. And in my career, I've seen a lot of shifts in leadership and the demands on leaders and what we consider the most critical skills that leaders need to have. So today, this is less of a warning and more of a reflection, just a conversation about what I'm genuinely seeing going well in the world of work. Before we dive deeper, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel. If you could like the video and leave me a comment, if you find this content valuable, your support will help me to continue to make these leadership videos. Now, let's jump in. So the first thing that I wanted to acknowledge is that one of the biggest changes I've noticed is how leadership is starting to look more connected and definitely displaying more human qualities. Fewer leaders are trying to be the hero with all the answers. There are more leaders willing to say things like, "I'm still thinking this through," or "I'd really like your perspective on this." And interestingly, that doesn't weaken trust. It only strengthens it. Teams don't need leaders to be perfect, and I can absolutely attest to that being a leader myself. They need them to be grounded. They need them to be honest and also willing to listen. The old model of leadership where you had to project certainty at all costs, that was exhausting for everyone involved. What I'm seeing now is a quieter confidence, and it's actually creating better conversations, better decisions, and a lot less pressure to perform leadership instead of actually doing it. The other shift that I've been noticing is teams are talking about how they work, not just what they do, literally how they work together. And I'm not talking about in a fluffy, everybody needs to give each other a hug way. I'm talking about in a very practical, human way. Things like, how do we make decisions when there's tension? What do we do when people are overwhelmed? How do we want to communicate when things get stressful? This could be related to setting team guidelines or principles, or maybe even setting some team norms. And I want to share a really simple practice from my own experience that I feel made a big difference. At the start of my meetings, we do a quick check-in. Sometimes it was just one word. It could be a word like focused, tired, distracted, hopeful. Other times it was a little deeper, like what's on your mind as you come into this meeting that might be draining your energy or your attention. There were no hard rules, no pressure to overshare. People could even pass if they didn't feel they wanted to share. Everyone had the choice to keep it light. They could also go deeper if they wanted. But what it did was quietly change the room. Instead of pretending we were all neutral and perfectly optimized professionals, we acknowledged the reality. People show up carrying things, deadlines. We have family stuff. Some of us have health concerns. There are big life moments and definitely small stressors that still take up space. So then, at the end of the meeting, we do a quick checkout. Sometimes it was, what are you taking away from today's meeting? Something simple. Sometimes I'd ask, what did you appreciate? Or who did you appreciate today? Is there someone you'd like to recognize? And sometimes it was just one word checkout again, especially if we were stressed for time. It took maybe 2 minutes in total, and it made a huge difference. People actually felt seen. Meetings felt more intentional, and as a leader, I had a much better sense of the actual energy in the room instead of just guessing. It wasn't therapy, that's not what I'm talking about, and it wasn't forced vulnerability. It was just acknowledging that we're multifaceted human beings, and that how we show up to work is shaped by what's happening in the rest of our lives. Another shift is that productivity is actually being redefined, slowly, but meaningfully. For a long time, productivity only meant being busy. Full calendars, back-to-back meetings, always available. Now, More leaders are asking better questions, such as what actually needs to happen here? What's creating value and what's just noise? This shift is leading to fewer unnecessary meetings, clearer priorities, and more space for real focus. The healthiest teams that I've worked with or led aren't doing more. They're doing less, but doing it better. And that clarity alone reduces stress in ways no resilience workshop ever could. I also want to talk about how AI is reducing friction instead of replacing people. Now, this isn't always the case. We need to talk about AI because it's usually framed as either a miracle or a threat. So what I'm seeing in more thoughtful organizations is neither. AI is being used to reduce friction and to handle the repetitive, draining parts of work. So efficiency can be improved through drafting and summarizing, organizing information, giving people back some mental space. Again, I'm always a champion of augmentation rather than replacement of humans. And here's the key difference. Employees are being involved in how it's introduced. When people understand why a tool is being used and how it actually helps them, then that fear will drop. It will go away. And resistance drops. Adoption will also go up. It's not magic. It's good change management, even if no one's calling it that. And then the other shift that I've noticed is that compassion is becoming a core leadership capability. So this might be the most encouraging shift of all. Compassion is no longer being talked about as a nice to have. It's being recognized as a real leadership capability. Not compassion as in lowering your standards, but compassion as in understanding context, leading with curiosity, empathy, and acknowledging that people are navigating a lot. The world is a lot right now. The leaders who do this well aren't weaker. They're actually considered to be steadier. Their teams will trust them more. And when things get hard, which they will, and they are, those teams adapt faster. Compassion, it turns out, is incredibly effective. So here's my closing reflection. Yes, work is complex. Leadership is always going to be demanding. And the pace of change doesn't seem to be slowing down. But I don't think the story is all burnout and dysfunction. I think something quieter and better is emerging. We need to be positive about the future of leadership. Leaders are becoming more human. That's a great shift. Teams are becoming more honest. Who wouldn't want that? And organizations are slowly designing work that works for people. Sometimes the most impactful leadership shifts aren't big initiatives. They're the small, human practices that change how people experience work. So if what I've shared today reflects what you're seeing too, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Share your own perspective. And if you're interested in more thoughtful, grounded conversations like this, with some realism and a little bit of hope, feel free to subscribe. I'd love your support. That's all I have for today. So don't forget to keep on striving, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.